What's good, YouTube? We are back with another video. I hope you guys are feeling blessed out there and feeling well. Today's topic is going to be about cueing and form. I had, again, just like I always mention, a situation arise where it just started having my brain churning and stuff that I talk about all the time and that I've delved into throughout my years of training. And especially with more wisdom and more experience, is something that you start to fine tune, especially when it comes to from the coaching lens, having more information and more knowledge, and you want to just spew. But whether you have somebody with a long training history or somebody brand new, it is quite nuanced and is not exactly how you think it would go with just spewing that information. So let's dive into it. So with all the anecdotal experience, all the science and things that may be evolving, things that are tried and true that are staying, you think, okay, expert, master, trainer, pour into the individual that you're coaching, whether in person, even if it's a cue virtually, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous. It's like, okay, I'm going to just give them the gamut. They'll have all this at their disposal. They're going to be able to retain and absorb all the information given, and they're just going to lock in. It's going to take a little bit of time for them to acclimate and get used to it, but they're just going to be able to receive all of that. And I'm here to tell you that is not how that works at all. Especially with more experience, you start to really figure out like, hey, whether a child and doesn't necessarily matter age. Let's just stick to either training age versus like a lengthier training history. So whether it's somebody who's a 10-year-old kid or even a 60-year-old adult, if their training age is on the lesser end, like less than a year or even a few years, and they don't necessarily understand proprioception, where their body is in space, if they don't really have maybe the skills acquired to have a lot of balance, coordination, just the prerequisites for foundational strength, they're going to be on this end versus the person that may be already 12, 13 and has had a few years in the gym, knows where their body is in space. They can get acclimated very quickly and grasp movements after like one cue or after one set, maybe within even the same training session. And that still can be applicable to the older age adult as well. So that is going to be the parameters of how we look at this and view this. So as always, of course, everybody's nuanced, individualistic, and you have to cater to the individual and know your personnel, again, whether online or in person. But even if they're on either side of the spectrum, I still have somewhat of a similar approach. The name of the game or the thought process, especially with coaching and my experience and seeing people, hundreds of people over time, is that spewing of that dump of information is not really conducive or helpful regardless of the training age. First, you have to have the lens or mind frame that it's a liberating feeling and also better for their autonomy in the long term when they can self-assess and auto-regulate themselves. So you have a few options. You either give one or two cues for slight adjustment because obviously you want to steer them in the right direction and make sure that they're safe and they're working the target muscles that they're working. But at the same time, you also have the other side of the coin where you can give them certain constraints that put them in a situation to then get the outcome that you guys are both desiring or looking for. So let's utilize a specific example, and then I'm going to go into an analogy in a second. Let's use an example of teaching an RDL. I would say for a majority of new people into the gym, and especially even a majority of coaches, they probably could align and understand teaching an RDL is not the easiest first movement if somebody doesn't necessarily know where their body is in space and how to put everything together. You have, and I've probably alluded to it before in a previous video, but I'm going to bring it back. So you have, okay, for most people, if we're talking about a stiff leg RDL, probably around like shoulder width apart with the feet. If I were to go into the whole brain dump, the brain dump is going to be, we have tripod pressure into our foot. We got big foot, pinky toe, heel into the ground. Then you also are trying to let them know, don't claw the ground because we want to be able to work all the intrinsic muscles within our foot to strengthen our feet. Because if we wear shoes all the time, we immobilize our foot and then they get weak over time. Nobody's trying to hear that when they got to breathe and go through the reps and make sure that they maintain the form throughout the set, whether the training age is less or it's more. But that's just foot contact. So imagine that. And then you're trying to tell somebody, okay, we're going to have a slight bend at the knee. Also, pretend like, for lat engagement, like there's $100 bill under your armpit and don't let it go. That's a simple cue that I think is applicable for a lot of people. And I like to keep them very simple, like second, third grade level, regardless of the training age. But even still, now they're thinking about lat engagement. They're thinking about keeping tension throughout their entire body and squeezing the dumbbells, making sure the dumbbells are deep into their palm. They don't want to have all this space in between because any energy leaks can make it a little bit challenging as the weight goes up. So deep in the palm. So now we just talked about foot pressure, slight bend to the knees, keeping lat engagement, keeping tension at the dumbbell. Then they still got to think about breathing. And then I also told them 8 reps, like if we're training in person. So that's a lot of things to factor in, especially on the lesser training age. But even for the more advanced, if you give them a certain cue, you can still be advanced and lift a certain amount of weight and quality weight, regardless if it's just relative to you or just relative to the masses, and still need a little bit of adjusting to where we can make it more effective or more conducive for you to lift more weight or build your capacity. Whatever the case is, everybody can still make potentially get some nuggets out of it. There's some people that just have it down pat, but like I said, so all of that information is a lot to absorb. My lens or thought process when it comes to cueing, especially given the situation of in person and going back to them being able to auto regulate and the constraints example I was talking about a couple of minutes back, let's say it is not severely off, but it is off in the sense that they just don't have it down pat. Either they're excessively rounding and we're not looking for that in their back, or if they're not rounding and they keep a neutral spine, maybe they're like hyperextend their legs, and instead of keeping that soft bend at the knees we're looking for, they like go super locked out and straight as they push their hips back. So a constraint would be, let's say this is a bench height. This is like the soft part of the bench. So a constraint would be putting the bench behind them, having them stand close to that bench. Their calves are maybe touching the bench and they have that soft bend in the knees. Putting them in this environment is not going to allow them, so from this angle, it won't allow them to hyperextend. So now I kind of just took away something that's their natural state when they go into that movement, if that's a tendency that they have. So putting them in that environment then can help them still keep the neutral spine, then help them keep the soft bend and not hyperextend, feel the movement in their hamstrings and glutes because those are the target tissues, and then they get the movement. All within that, I didn't give any crazy cues. I didn't go through the other 5 things I mentioned. I didn't go through the lat engagement or squeezing the dumbbells or the foot pressure. All I could literally do is, hey, set was done, great job. Still want to motivate and empower and encourage them. Hey, let's try the exact same thing. All I want you to do is just stand in front of this bench. Don't let your calves come off of the bench and do the exact same thing. And I let them make the mistake, even if they do it. And then there's another thing that pops up. Like, let's say they fix the hyperextension at the legs, but then their back starts to round again. Okay, we at least eliminated the first one that got there. I can then use another cue. Maybe I drop the weight, especially if they're more so a beginner and it's like something that they're really struggling with. And we use like a behind the back kind of approach, whether I load with a kettlebell to keep them in that neutral spine, or even if I don't want to load it at all, I use a dowel or something like that, or a PVC pipe. And now we got the fixing of the hyperextension, also the fixing of the spine. Now it's cleared up. I didn't go through 98 cues to overstimulate them because they're already processing a lot, from keeping tension throughout their body, like again, breathing properly, maintaining form, duplicated rep by rep throughout the entire set, managing fatigue as they start to, tire out, also keep track of the reps. Like I said, a lot to process. So I wanted to necessarily just harp on that lens or that thought process of when you start throwing the kitchen sink at people, even the advanced athlete, it's still a lot. And you got to be mindful of that. I like to stick to the 1 to 2 if I'm going to go a verbal cue. And the other approach that I really like is giving them a constraint for them to then figure it out themselves, because again, that's more liberating and it honestly can show you what their tendencies are. So you have that in the back of your mind, whether some people have more of a anterior bias, posterior bias, maybe they shift to one side, whatever their natural fail safe is, like it starts to reveal itself, and that gives you more data and more information, which then helps you cater towards the individual, and you just get like a different sense of a coach's eye, so where the person really appreciates it and they're like, oh wow, they really see these things, and then you can slow it down through a video in real time. Another part I want to harp on real quick as far as from a cueing perspective that I think is very important, at least how I learned it, and it still is evolving, is like you can go through the constraints. I think it's almost like a constraints and the 1 to 2 cues first, like verbal. The order after that then can be more of the you then demo. Like I always want to go put them in an environment first. If the environment's not working, then verbal. Then after verbal, then me physically doing it so they see it. Then after me physically doing it, then potentially tactile. So you can always tell the evolution or the vastness of the coach and how their lenses is if that's their first measure or their first way of going about a cue to get what the outcome they're looking for. I always find that last. It shouldn't just be this whole we're out here, I'm puppeteering and moving, especially if we're in person touching the limb. Like I really should have to do that. Obviously, if it takes to that level and the client is comfortable and you'll have that conversation, you can go about it. Not wrong. I'm just saying I definitely think that's the spectrum or the flow of how that should go. The last thing that I mentioned a few minutes back with the analogy that I want to close on to drive the message home, let's look at this like it is somebody learning to drive for the very first time. 16, 17-year-old you, and you're with your parent, guardian, sibling, whatever the case is. If you are trying to merge into traffic for the very first time and you got to merge and stay with the flow, but you got to stay within the speed limit, but you also got to flow with traffic. Make sure you put your signal on. Also, I could tell like the rear view mirror wasn't aligned. Don't look down at this. Look for that squirrel. Like that is going to overstimulate the person while, you know what? First of all, put them in an environment that liberates them, empowers them, and that seems feasible. Put them in a parking lot that's not even, no one's around them, a lot of space. There's no fences, there's no cars. Practice there. Go straight. Then after that, you can start to work on the minute details, the signal, this is how you turn, this is how you three-point turn, this is how you parallel park. All those things start to come together. But you put them first in the environment. You get where I'm going at? You put them in the environment first. Then when they feel confident and they build that credibility and they see the evidence in the environment, you still will continue to put them in certain environments, but now it's more situational, excuse me. So it can be on an open road or whatever the case is, maybe not the highway, but now they are using signals. Now they are driving within the parameters of a speed limit and not a parking lot. You get where I'm going with that. So I want to employ you to kind of think of it with that lens, whether you're working with a coach, whether you're working with a friend, and maybe you're the friend that is the person that may have the most knowledge in your group. It's very easy to just dump, and sometimes it can be frustrating for you as the friend or frustrating for the other person. And it's just like, you're giving me the information, but you got to think about it. If you got the training age and the training history and you've been in the gym and that person hasn't, or they have, but they've never had direction like this, it's a lot for them to acquire. And even if they are acquiring it to be able to get some semblance or some goal and get a little bit better, that's great. But you also don't want them to develop bad habits and dependability. The best part, the coolest part is to be able to have this autonomy and to be able to do this on your own. So you dang near feel like you could teach it to somebody else. I always have been an advocate. I feel like if I understand something, I can not only take it from very complex levels, but I can bring it down to very elementary levels for all people. Whether I have a CEO or business exec, I want to talk like that, not like goo goo gaga, but you know what I mean? Like I want to make it very simple and consolidated that no matter what, rain, sleet, or snow, tired or not, they're not in the mind frame to hear my complex vernacular and all that. Hey, keep tension, drive up fast, control on the negative. Like I'm just trying to simplify, dumb it down if I need to go verbal as far as a cue. But keep that in mind, whether you're that person in that group. Put them either in an environment. If you don't know how, research how to or ask for help. And if the next layer for you is the verbal, keep it 1 to 2. Let them make the mistake. Let them regulate and correct themselves. And over time, it'll clear up. But the more that you allow them to do it, it's going to be way more fruitful than you just telling them. So that's all I got. I think that was an awesome topic. Definitely come around to this or watch it again if you need to. Leave anything in the comments as far as anything you like from it, anything you want to hear. And yeah, again, like, comment, subscribe, and I'm going to catch y'all next time. Peace.